I was second year at university before I knew what I was supposed to do in terms of applying for a training contract, funding to fund the LPC and so forth, because I didn't know. I didn't have access to those vital networks. So if we start to teach law in schools, we start to teach our young citizens about the law, that it is somewhere that they can go to. The advice that I would give anyone considering a career in the legal profession is to do your research. Absolutely investigate, speak to anyone who works in the legal area, the legal arena that you can. Utilise your networks. If you don't ask, you don't get, as my mother always says. So if you have and are able to access those networks, then absolutely inquire about work experience, inquire about internships or training contracts and so forth. So it's to look in places that traditionally perhaps we wouldn't look for those opportunities that exist. So my advice is to absolutely get into action in terms of there's law centres, there's, rather than the traditional route, in-house opportunities, academia, all those different career pathways that potentially I didn't know about when I was starting out in a career in law. So absolutely do your investigation, find out what the opportunities are, and make sure you utilise your networks. My ambitions as president is to leave the legal profession more diverse and inclusive than the one I entered. And I'm clear that this must be a shared ambition with each and every one of us playing our part. To leave the profession genuinely accessible, that where if you have the aptitude, the ability, the skills, the knowledge, that you can thrive in this profession, regardless of your background, any characteristic, where there is genuine equality of opportunity. So I have chosen to focus on a number of areas as president. And before I start, a reminder that I am the 177th, the 6th female, the first black office holder, and the first person of colour to become president of the National Law Society of England and Wales in its almost 200-year history, a remarkable achievement. And so some of the priorities I have sought to focus on during my tenure in office is around equality, diversity and inclusion and social mobility. And that picks up aspects of my own journey, my own life, as first generation British, growing up in a single parent household on a council estate, coming into law when I knew no one who to ask those questions, no networks to access. And people often ask me, how did you do it? How did you become the president of the Law Society of England and Wales? And that takes me back to when I say about being determined, being resilient, and being steadfast in your pursuit. Mental health and well-being is another focus area of mine. As we emerge from the pandemic, we know that there are a number of us who are struggling with issues not only around the pandemic, but the legal profession is a very pressured profession and the work we do is very pressurised. So we have to get into a space where we talk about our health, our mental health and well-being as we do our physical health. And I'm absolutely pleased to be championing the discussions around mental health and well-being, and that we are talking openly about the challenges that some of us have faced over the last 2 years, and indeed will continue to face and beyond. In-house solicitors. I am the second in-house solicitor to become president in almost 50 years. The in-house community is the fastest growing area of our profession, with some 25% of solicitors now working in-house. But we know the challenges of working in-house are different to perhaps the challenges that one faces if you work in private practice. So it's absolutely right that the Law Society takes the opportunity to focus and ensure how we can better support our colleagues who work in-house. Access to justice and technology, another key area for me to focus on. We've all seen how technology has transformed the way that we have lived and worked in the last 2 years and beyond. And we know that technology has a role to play in our justice system. During the height of lockdown, we saw in our commercial and business court, some 85% of that work continued. But other parts of our justice system came to a halt, a grind. And so we know that technology plays a role in ensuring that the wheels of justice continue to turn. But we also know that there is a huge swathe of our fellow citizens, parts of England and Wales, where people do not have access to the internet, and even if they did have access to the internet, they don't have the skills or the infrastructure, the hardware, to be able to access that technology. We have to be mindful, and somebody said to me last evening, we have to be mindful that you can now go on to your phone and tick a box if you are issued with a fixed penalty notice or a driving notice, speeding notice, and so forth. That you can tick a box and plead guilty, and it's quickly dealt with. But individuals, our fellow citizens, must know the implications, the long-term implications of doing so. And so we, the Law Society, advocate that there should be appropriate alerts, signage in the technology that underpins our justice system to ensure that nobody is disadvantaged in their assessing access to justice. And that feeds in nicely to public legal education. I absolutely believe that legal rights mean absolutely nothing if you don't know when those rights are being taken away, or indeed you don't even know how to enforce those rights. So for me, public legal education serves 2 points. One, around access to justice, because if you know where to go to seek legal advice, or indeed you're able to identify when you have a legal issue, then you can go and get legal advice, or where to go to. And around social mobility, I often hear that the legal profession is not for me. I don't look or sound like a solicitor. We want to bust some of those myths, demystify some of those myths around those who can enter our profession. And if we start to teach law in schools from an earlier age, we get our young people thinking about a career in law, where it is a profession that is welcoming, one that looks and sounds exactly like them. And they start to think about the stepping stones, the roadmap that they have to lay as they navigate their way through the educational system. And even down to what universities they should apply to, what GCSEs, what A-levels they should take. And they start to think about those all-important networks, whence we know that sponsorship, mentors and work experience are drawn from. I was second year at university before I knew what I was supposed to do in terms of applying for a training contract, funding to fund the LPC and so forth, because I didn't know. I didn't have access to those vital networks. So if we start to teach law in schools, we start to teach our young citizens about the law, that it is somewhere that they can go to. The thing I enjoy most about my work is the ability to meet people. Everybody I meet has contributed to this journey. And I absolutely love getting out, hearing people's stories, and meeting people.